More medications, less health. Something's broken. Traditional medicine manages symptoms, but true healing addresses root cause. I'm Josh Rimini, pharmacist turned healer. At Beyond the Pills, we merge ancient wisdom with modern-day science to inspire you through stories of transformation, practical trainings, and holistic healing. Join me and other practitioners as we guide you towards vibrant health, body, mind, and spirit, and move beyond symptom management into true healing. Welcome back to Beyond the Pills, where we merge ancient wisdom with modern-day science to uncover what true healing really means. I'm your host, Josh Rimini, pharmacist turned healer and modern-day medicine man. Today, we are diving into the topic that touches every single one of us: inflammation, the silent force behind so many chronic issues, but we're approaching it through the lens most people have never even seen before. I'm joined today by James White. He's the CEO of KBMO Diagnostics, a company behind the FIT test, among others, the first patented assay that measures both IgG and complement, the inflammation marker for 176 foods and additives. James has also helped grow the KBMO from just 5 providers to over 5,000, probably more now, worldwide, and he's transforming how we identify hidden inflammatory markers. By the end of this conversation, I hope you will feel inspired, empowered, and understand that not all testing is the same, and the right information can change everything about your health. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you very much indeed. And I want to mention, Josh and I met at Nutridyne a month or so ago, and we had an amazing conversation. So the first one was great. So I'm hoping the second one is even better. So
that's why we're here, right? It's like, how the heck do you know each other?
You know expectations.
Yeah, we're entrepreneurs at heart, right? And we speak the same language because we speak practically. So as soon as we started learning, and of course, there was all these aha moments. It was like, oh my gosh, you're the guy I've been looking for. Because the tests that I've been doing were the ones I was doing were like, you were the next gen approach to that. So it was really cool. And for those brand new to this stuff, like, how do you describe the mission behind KBMO Diagnostics?
So the whole concept was, without going into kind of ancient history about my background, I'd done some stuff in cardiovascular health, some stuff looking at genetics, and I was feeling slightly kind of dissatisfied because, like, cardiovascular, after all that training and everything, they tell you fundamentally eat less, exercise more, but not on any kind of personalized basis. It was all kind of like, that's it. So, and then molecular was a bit the same in terms of genetics. It's all very like, well, if you're in this population, 1 or 2% of you might get something. It's like, it's really not doing it for me. So I was like, well, let's look at something related to, what do we all do? We all have to eat. That's not optional. And so what we came up with was this test that enables us to look at what are we consuming is leading us to an inflammatory response. And as Josh said on the intro, food is the ancient healer. Everyone says, what you are, what you eat. Go back to Hippocrates, it's all based on gut health and how you're feeling. And so this seemed like a pretty cool way of getting to that in terms of looking at which foods you're consuming on an individualized basis are leading to an inflammatory response. And again, if we go back to ancient history, everything begins in the gut. And more importantly, the root cause of everything is inflammation. So I was like, this was my aha moment. How do we get a test which identifies on an individualized basis, different for James to Josh, which foods will cause an inflammatory response, but with a scientific approach that enables it to come up with a handful of foods rather than some of these tests which kind of go, here's 50 different foods that you need to eliminate from your diet. And as I say, I'm not a psychologist, but when you see the patient's bottom lip wobble, you know that you've told them there's too many foods to take out of their diet. So the idea here was to say, this is really cool. This shows them a much more targeted approach without baffling them with too much science. So look, these are the foods that you need to eliminate in a color-coded way, so something that they can understand. And as Josh and I mentioned, one of his mentors and one of the guys that I look up to dearly in terms of Sachin Patel, who I'm sure Josh has mentioned before on here, as he always says, the doctor of the future is the patient. So again, coming up with a test that enables us to bring all these things together, which is understandable for the patient, because fundamentally, if the patient's not compliant, we're all wasting our time. So what we wanted to do is come up with a test that looks at some of those real key attributes, which is understandable for the patient, that enables them to move forward in a way that they actually take control of their own journey, whatever that might be. So that was really how we came up with KBMO and the FIT test, so the food inflammation test. So in the UK, we call it the Ronseal test. It says it does what it says on the tin, i.e. food inflammation test.
I love this is why I think we got along so well, is because we were talking about the complexity that people take when they go on a wellness journey, and when not all labs are the same either. Like what you said has been true, and I've experienced this myself. Is like a lot of people now know, like, oh, what foods am I allergic to, and now I can't eat, and it's not quite true. It's like, how do we heal, right? And so I love the fact that we got to talk a little bit about the science, but not too geeky, because we want people to just know, like, you can test for IgG. And then, like I said, like what I call it is like, there's a lot of ink on this test. There's a lot of ink on this report. And then you show people, oh my gosh, I have all these IgG allergies to all these foods. I can't eat them anymore. I love cheese. I love chocolate. I love this. And all of a sudden they get overwhelmed, and then they do it. So there's this balance that you created. I love the entrepreneur in you. Is like, how do we solve the problem? What are the foods that are actually causing inflammation? Which means you took that and you test now for the complement, which in the geeky ways, that just means that it's actually doing something to cause the inflammation, right?
Yeah. So, and as you say, like, there's nothing against IgG only testing, but what it's telling you is which foods you're exposed to.
It's awake. You're awake. Yeah.
Exactly.
And if you're leaky, that means you're eating them.
Exactly. Josh, great news. You're eating. Woo! So the concept was, let's go on the next step further that says, more importantly, of those foods you're eating, which ones are causing that inflammatory response? So back to the kind of science, it's looking at your whole immune system versus half of it. So the half that was currently being looked at was the IgG, i.e. what you're exposed to. We thought, wouldn't that be a lot more convincing if we told patients, look, rather than repeating back to you what you're eating, let's say of the foods you're eating, which ones are causing inflammation, which then the aha moment for everyone is, oh, wow, that's then correlating really tightly clinically with the symptoms the patients are presenting with. Because again, the root cause of all disease is inflammation. And so on that basis, let's identify the foods which are causing inflammation. Put simply, if you think about it, when you go and buy a car, it used to be you'd say, well, which oil are you going to put in that car to work out how your engine is going to run as efficiently as possible. And so in essence, that's what we're doing with this test. Let's work out which foods or oil in that analogy are actually the ones that are going to make your body or system run as efficiently as possible. And that's what this test does. It tries to, we're all probably feeling, subpar in some regards because we're inflamed. So if we can identify the foods that are causing that, and again, unbeknownst to us, because the reality is what happens is we all look at the food pyramid and say, oh, well, that's good for me, that's bad for me. Well, unfortunately, that pyramid's about as useful today as a pyramid, because again, it's not relevant, because there's no such thing as one size fits all. We know that's a terrible idea. So this is where this really helps. It gives you as a patient a way of going, cool, which foods are causing that inflammation, which is whether it's showing up as a migraine, skin-related, gut-related issue. How do we identify those? And that's what this test does. And so that's the kind of really unique and I think excellent part of why this is patented and really gives us that edge over those other tests that we were talking about. It is really zeroing in on a handful of foods, which enables you to really take control of your own destiny, rather than going, oh my gosh, I've got to lean heavily on a provider or someone, and now here's an X number of drugs I've got to take. No, Let's eliminate those foods and let's see how you feel.
I love and it is that simple. And what what I love about this is it's the evolution of what we've known, right? You took IgG, which is not really well known in the grand scheme of things, but in the functional realm, we talk about food is medicine, or poison, right?
Yep.
And then so people know it's like, all right, if I eat whole foods, I'm doing great. But then you go into like, well, if your gut isn't in order and then you're leaky and these things are sliding in and they're causing inflammation, it's not just sliding in. It's okay, I woke up, they're around, but now that thing is angry and now it's inflamed. And then what you said is like those downstream effects, skin, pain, gut, doesn't matter. It's just, it's inflamed and that your body's triggering it in a way that manifests out in that. But then you took it that step further because the mechanistic functional medicine guy in me says, well, what do we do to heal the gut, right? The 5R process, the IFM or whatever approach, right? We teach that. So why I love what your test does, it tells people not only the foods that are inflaming them if they're eating whole foods healthy, right? When they get there, but then what's inflaming them. But you went a step further, which is like, I love as an entrepreneur and as a business guy, like I love the why wouldn't I offers. You just threw in the gut permeability test.
Yeah, and that's down to.
I'm going to talk about this because when we get to the place where you're guided by someone that's going to actually do something with the gut, with supplementation, and do that 5R process of remove, repair, reinoculate, replace, and rebalance, there's a process to that. That's what they teach us in functional medicine. But I was for no extra cost than it costs these other labs, you're actually seeing markers to show people that they are leaky and they have inflammation because of the root cause of what that is and what we can do to actually do something with.
And the aha moment for me was we were, when I started the company, like every entrepreneur, you end up doing everything. And so I was a salesperson in New Hampshire. So in between the naturopaths and, the tattoo artists and the kind of karate dojos, you'd find the odd nutritionists and people and naturopaths talking about food sensitivity testing. And so I said, look, this is this great test and it's patented and we're looking at these multiple pathways. We eliminate these false positives. And they go, yeah, this is all great. But, some people we don't bother testing for because we think they've got leaky gut. And so, again, I've just come back from talking to one of our distributors in Thailand, of all places, who's been running the test for a while. And what really resonated with me over even in Thailand, they're talking about don't guess, test. And I thought that's fantastic. And in essence, that's what they were doing in New Hampshire. They weren't testing, they were guessing. In their defense, 15 years or so ago, there wasn't a gut barrier panel attached to a food sensitivity test. So that was really what we've tried to do. We've tried to say, look, let's not make this a gotcha moment where, sorry, you didn't add the gut barrier panel, so you didn't get that piece of information, provider. Our approach was let's combine them together, make it simple. So it's in essence a chicken and egg. Which comes first? Is it leaky gut or food sensitivities? And I took the view, I don't care. It's gonna come anyway. So
you're gonna do it anyway, so let's just do it.
Let's give it to you all up front. And then that way, if you don't have leaky gut, high five. Great. Good news. The gut's secure. We can just focus on which foods are causing inflammation. If the gut is leaky, which happens a lot of the time, then you can then go, okay, great. We now know we've got to heal the gut as well as looking at the foods which are causing that. So that was the kind of, the thought that we had was, look, how do we combine these two rather than making this, a way of charging more and more money? Again, a simplistic approach I had was, look, why don't we combine it? And then that makes the provider have more information and then have better clinical outcomes. And that's what we're seeing. And that's why I think we've really seen the kind of explosion over the last, 10 years or so. And like every entrepreneur, we're always an overnight success in about 10 years. So that's generally how it works. It's like you have to kind of be persistent, keep doing it, listen to your clients who say, look, this is what we want combined. So that's what we did to try and make sure we lead by having the best science in terms of the only patented food sensitivity And we were the first and only lab so far to combine these two tests together. And then we went a step further. So, right, let's develop a test around a thing called zonulin, which is really a great way of identifying what might be going on with the tight junctions to see if leaky gut's happening or not. And again, there was a test out there. It was from a company in Germany. It happened to be about the most un-Germanic thing I'd ever come across because it wasn't very accurate. Most things Germanic, you're like, oh my gosh, it'll have been over-engineered and it's going to be the most accurate thing ever known to man. This happened to be the one exception. So we spent 4 or 5 years working with a gentleman called Dr. Alessio Fasano, who if you haven't heard of him, definitely worth checking him out on YouTube. He is one of the most entertaining scientific speakers you'll ever hear. And he talks, and not only does he talk about zonulin, but he discovered the links between zonulin and celiac disease. And so again, back in the day, he came up with this great way of identifying why is it important to measure zonulin in terms of for a celiac and other patient populations since that work out that if there's an issue with those tight junctions in terms of how they're functioning, which is what the zonulin is measuring, then you really need to look at doing something about that. And so we partnered with him and our very own, a gentleman called Dr. Brent Dorval, who helped develop the food sensitivity test. In fact, he was our technical founder. And so again, his not insignificant claim to fame was he invented the first rapid HIV diagnostic. So again, everything we do is through his infectious disease kind of lens. So we made sure the testing we've developed is highly accurate, highly reproducible, but more importantly, comes from a really high level of science perspective. So with the input of Dr. Alessio Fasano on our zonulin test, as well as the brilliance of Dr. Dorval in terms of his development skills to bring that test together. So it's that combination of world-class science, and then someone daft enough to attend many conferences to kind of get the word out there to say, look, this is how you should be doing this. So again, it's, to Josh's point, it's an evolution, not a revolution. We basically said, look, here's IgG. Let's put IgG with complement to measure the whole immune system versus half of it. Let's not stop there. Let's also say, well, what's going on from a gut perspective as well. So how do we measure the whole immune system and gut health all in one finger stick test, which is really simple to administer? And I know Josh has started running that in the pharmacy now.
Yeah, our pharmacy and wellness center, like I said, like I knew of, right? Even in like functional, like, oh, you test IgG, you know it's a sensitive, you do the elimination test, you do the 5-hour gut restoration process, which is relatively simplistic. But like I said, we're talking evolution here. And yeah, they taught us about zonulin when I went through functional training in 2018. And holy crap, this is amazing. How do I do this? And then you go over here and how do I do that? And then all of a sudden you've gotten like 5 tests. It's cost $5,000. And all of a sudden you're like, great, what do I do with it? So I loved this approach because part of what we do in the ethos of what we are launching nationwide with our listeners and the Beyond the Pills collective that's forming is wellness made simple, right? You took like 4 biomarkers and now you can demonstrate with specificity and reproducibility of leaky gut. And then it's just, it can't get any better. Like we talked about it. It's like you do all that, right? You fix them up, you heal them up, you repair them up, you put in the good stuff, you take out the bad stuff, and then you reintroduce foods. But then you did, all right, well, why would you need, I love this part about let's call it the heart-centered part of entrepreneurship. Why test if you don't have to? So then you just said, well, when you retest, let's just give them the permeability side, make it cheaper so they don't have to go through that whole panel again and spend more dollars that aren't. So it's, you literally you democratized it like 3 times to make it where literally this is exactly what you need. And this is how easy it is for providers and people to get to work together, because you retest, you just test if it's leaky. And if it's not, you did the job.
And I think the whole thing that we're beginning to see now is, to your point, it gives people some level of, okay, how long is this going to be? Because sometimes you work with a provider, you go, oh my God, this is a never-ending checkbook that I've just opened here. This is going to be a nightmare. Obviously, hopefully you're going to feel better as well. But, for a patient, you're like, well, I think I'm bought into this, but I'm not entirely sure. So the idea was to say, look, it's a 6-month process. You do the first test up front, which is the food sensitivity and the gut barrier. And to your point, Josh, in 6 months' time, let's just retest that gut barrier because we want to see, did we heal the gut? Given that if we all believe that all disease starts in the gut, back to Hippocrates again, back to the ancient man himself. Look, if that's what's going on and we healed the gut, high five, we're in great shape. But more importantly, if things aren't totally healed, we've got the evidence to then go, okay, and this is now why I think you should consider staying on that supplement or moving on to something slightly different. And up until this point, unfortunately, most providers haven't had that second piece of evidence, so they've been guessing. So this is the whole hope here, is to say, look, we all know that providers should make sure they have that second test done. But I also kind of joke that if a provider can sell a $5,000 kind of package of tests up front and then 6 months later sell $5,000 more of testing, they're probably in the wrong job, because that's an amazing sales job. So the reality is, what we want to do is make it affordable and easy for the patient and provider. The patient gets, okay, I understand I'm in this game for 6 months to see, can I make a significant improvement or not? The provider feels better because they feel, look, I'm going to have some evidence in 6 months which will demonstrate, did we get some improvement? And if we didn't, is that a combination of we didn't quite get the right thing going, or is that patient being compliant or not? And that's one of the other key elements of this. We want to help the patients be compliant with looking at the whole immune system, but equally importantly, we want to make sure that when we retest that, we've got some level of honesty going on that says, I'm going to be retested here. So I can't just say, Josh, yeah, I kind of feel better. We can look and go, wow, why did those markers get worse? And it looks like all these pills are still in the same bottle as I gave you 6 months ago. So again, we want to make sure that we're giving you opportunities for the patient to be successful and to have evidence of why they now feel better. Because the other thing I always find with this food sensitivity testing is it sometimes should be called a test for amnesia, because the number of patients who come in and go, oh, I feel terrible. In 6 months' time, yeah, I think I feel slightly better. I'm not really sure. But again, this evidence to make sure they've got that is really key. Because again, we want to make sure they have improved.
Totally why testing is, why guest test. I love that. I'm going to use that. Is you see it in real time. So it's nice to say, like, dairy and gluten is inflammatory. Great. We all know that. But then they see it and they're like, oh, crap. It is inflammatory to me, like not to this whole population. So I love that the amnesia test. It's great. Is because we get to validate for our own human experience needs to see it personalized to me. Now you can do it with an elimination and you eliminate all the stuff and you see how you feel, but it doesn't resonate until you see it. Now I want to rapid fire. I got to speed date you now, because you do other tests that are amazing, and we're talking inflammation, but now, and there's nothing wrong with people going deeper. Like, if you got to go deeper on the more advanced labs, great, but you shouldn't have to unless you need to. This is like the 80-20 rule in perfect scenario. 80% of the time, if we do this, we're going to get in a really good place because we're working on the gut, we're healing the gut, and we're eliminating the bad stuff. It's like the premise of functional medicine: eliminate the bad stuff, put in the good stuff. Great. Yeah. But I'm big into men's health and I'm big into cardiovascular stuff. You got a cardiovascular inflammation test. Same principles we've talked about over these 20 minutes of, can I make the better widget? Can I evolve this? Can I make it simple? And can I give people what they need without overcharging them? When I saw this cardiovascular inflammation test at the conference we were at a couple weeks ago, I was like, it was the second, oh, holy crap, where you been all my life? Because I've done advanced cardiometabolic testing, gone to the lab and did 5 vials of blood, and then went to a cardiologist, lipidologist, and he was telling me about all this stuff. It was so, for me, was so intense. I was like, and I've never done it on a patient, even though I needed to get more information. And then I see what's in front in this little finger stick thing test, and I'm like, Ah, now I'm giving this to everybody. So tell people in the next 5-ish minutes, like, holy crap, you got another one, but this is a different type of inflammation because we know cardiovascular disease and the standardized testing, like this is one step forward, but so impactful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, I kind of follow different people who kind of read and kind of write some really interesting stuff around cardiovascular health. But like we talked about up front, it's fundamentally eat less, exercise more is what they come back with, and it's worse than that on the basis that the standard lipid profile they did a study with over 100,000 patients. 50% of patients who had a heart attack of that 100,000 had a normal lipid profile on the day of the heart attack. So it's basically telling you that, you're probably better off to go and buy a coin versus spend all that money on a lipid profile. But unfortunately, the lipid profile is the only thing the insurance companies will cover. Now, that's a problem. So we said, well, look, how do we go a couple of steps further without going to your point, Josh, of I've now got 10 vials of blood in front of me. I feel faint, and I'm sure the results will be fascinating, but will I make it back to my car in time to kind of refill on some of the blood they've just taken out of me? So the idea was, let's do a finger stick, keep it simple, can be done in the office. There's a big hole somewhere around the world where people have got all these tubes that never quite made it to the phlebotomist. So the idea was, keep it simple. Let's make sure they can do the test either at home or in the office. So, because not everyone has the access to phlebotomy that every office has. But the concept was keep it short, keep it simple, and that's really what we did. We added a couple of my favorite markers. ApoB is a great marker to give you a really good indication of heart attack risk. The other marker that, if you all remember nothing else from what this crazy English guy was talking about, is LP little a. All right. Make sure if you see a cardiologist, you don't let him out the building unless he tests you for LP little a. It's basically a genetic marker, and 1 in 3 of the US population have it. And so it basically means if you have elevated levels of LP little a, it means your plaquing risk goes up exponentially. So if you do nothing else apart from listen to this thing, is go and get tested for LP little a. It's a genetic test. You only need to be tested once for it. And it'll tell you how aggressive your plaquing is, which is a fundamental part of cardiovascular health, which most people, it's, again, the most staggering number is 1% of the US population have been tested for it. So again, that's another key one that you can walk away with from here is run that cardiovascular inflammation test. You'll get your LP little a. And that's what you should give everyone in your family for Christmas, is a cardiovascular inflammation test to see of everyone around the table who's got that elevated LP little a. Because again, that is a dramatic improvement on your health, but it's just a small advancement in terms of that standard lipid profile. And so for me, again, it's one of those things as someone standing back, maybe trying to look at these things in more an entrepreneurial way, say, like, what makes sense? What can we give them a little bit more? LP little a and ApoB, and also rather than having we had a direct measurement, because a lot of these lipid profiles, it's an indirect measurement as well, or it's a measured versus direct. So again, we made sure that we were measuring these things as well. So all minor things, but when you put them together, all very helpful. We also measured a thing called homocysteine, which is another key marker. Again, looking at inflammation, and we've done studies on back to the food sensitivity test, and one of the ones was looking at IBS patients, and it was an IRB approved, which basically just means that James got charged a lot more money, but it was an IRB approved study, which is all good to say. 100 patients. What we saw was a dramatic reduction in the IBS severity score of all these patients, but more importantly, the patients that we had that intervention in, they also saw a dramatic reduction in their high sensitive CRP and their homocysteine levels. And so that's why we added both of those markers onto our cardiovascular inflammation test. Because again, that inflammation isn't just limited to your heart, it's all through your body. So again, we wanted to make sure these systems all interact. Let's make sure we see some of these links going on within the cardiovascular health as well as the gut health as well.
Well, that's, to me, like, you took simple markers. So yeah, if you can manage homocysteine, C-reactive protein, ApoB, LP little a, like the why not is so fun. It's like 1%.
Yeah.
And if we did that, and this test is only a couple $100, it's not expensive, but the amount of information that we get out of that puts so much level of awareness. And yes, you need some, let's call it a functional lens to work those numbers. But if you can see inflammation in that way, the aha I got out of that conference was kind of what you said with the 50% thing, right? It's like the number one symptom. We know cardiovascular disease is the number one killer, right? Half of you are going to die from that. So there's half the population. The other population is the first symptom of cardiovascular disease, and 35% of that half is death. Death.
Exactly.
That's the worst symptom to have, especially the first one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you improve omega-3 index in your blood and you knew that you were inflamed, that 35% goes way down, like 90%. So that's why I pump people full of omega-3s. And this one test will help us move us in the direction this is beyond the pills, right? This is beyond the labs, way beyond a standard lipid panel, right? And so to me, again, for a couple $100 for each one of these tests with the right person who knows what they're talking about, you could do major good health, right? In a way that's scalable. Again, this is affordable stuff. It would be really good if we could get these approved by insurance, but you know what? We all have to put the insurance pays for sickness, not wellness.
Yep.
So you took that 1%, and even jumping that up 5% points is going to change millions of lives. And so that's why I love this conversation, James, because that's the impact we're talking about, something simple.
And I think it was, again, the nice thing for us is, you know, one of the great pleasures I have is going out, talking to providers. And, you know, I thought we cracked the code by making sure we were looking at inflammation and then looking at the immune health. But literally, I had providers saying, it's really weird. We fixed those two things. And I still had patients having heart attacks. I was like, well, Jesus, that's right. That's the third leg of the stool. We need to look at that. Let's look at cardiovascular health. But it was kind of like, oh, cracky, I can't rest yet. We've got to work on cardiovascular. So, but it was fun to see, look, here's 3 different elements. And if you can work on those 3 with 2 very simple tests, you give the patient a way of taking ownership of their journey. And again, they're not dramatic changes, but the information that we give them, I think, is demonstrable improvement in terms of their overall health.
Well, when people pay, they pay attention. That's one. So you got to be informed, confident, and make those decisions. But once they see it, you can't unsee it.
Yep.
You can choose not to do anything with it. But what we're talking about is in the health and wellness and healing perspective is prevention is a cure. If I could prevent you from having a heart attack, like I feel good at night. I feel like I'm saving lives, and I feel like I'm sleeping really well. And if you said your dad died of a heart attack, well, we can talk about epigenetics, but let's look, let's see. Like these are it's fun. It's like there's nothing wrong with the standard of care, except the standard needs to evolve, right? Literally, this is like, if it only costs a couple $100 on everybody's insurance plan, this is not going to bankrupt society. GLP-1s cost $1,500 a month.
Yep.
Like we could reverse these things, and holy moly, I love the supplement side of Wellness Made Simple. Like here's the top 5 things everybody's going to need. And now it's like, I've moved it into the lab space. It's like, if you do nothing, these are 2 really good things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's I think where we've tried to kind of differentiate ourselves from other labs, you know, is how do we keep these things simple? Because we appreciate the providers are so busy and everyone's got a new, sharper, smarter way of doing everything. What our approach is, how do we make it as simple as possible? Not forgetting the importance of the great science in terms of all the scientists that we've got working behind the scenes on all these things are brilliant. And again, that's one of the things we've tried to do is work out, let's make sure we start with the world's best science and then simplify those results so the patient can actually understand them and move forward. And that's really the idea. So all the reports that we have are color coded, dark green being good, dark red being a bit of a problem. But the idea is simplify things to the point, because again, even with all the reports, you won't see many numbers on them. That's not because I'm illiterate from a numbers standpoint. It's because if I tell a patient their triglycerides are 500, why should they know that that's a really bad number to have? They shouldn't know that. But if they look at their number and say, oh, look, it's in the red, that probably is an issue. Correct. And so we're trying to make sure we can simplify things enough that the provider and the patient can look at it. The other thing we've done with the food sensitivity is we've given the patient an app. So the provider reviews the results, and then 14 days later, the patient gets the results on the phone. Because again, we've all been patients. We've all been like deer in the headlights when the provider's rattling off all these results and all these numbers and going, I'm totally overwhelmed. I've got no idea really what he's saying. I'm going to nod and hopefully avoid eye contact. And so the idea is then the app is something you can look at afterwards. You can say, oh my gosh, what did I get tested for? Where was I on that scale to see what's going on in terms of good or bad? And as well as that, on the food sensitivity, we've also made sure they get a meal plan. So you've got actually a way of moving forward on that rather than going, yeah, I don't understand those results, but that's okay. I didn't understand the last 20 years worth of results either. So the other neat thing with food sensitivity, again, which is slightly different from cardiovascular, is there's no judgment attached to these results, because most of patients have been bounced around the healthcare system, have been bashed over the head by all the providers going, God, you're terrible. Your numbers are all over the place. With a food sensitivity test, if it happens to be that Josh is sensitive to egg, James is milk, that's just great information that we found out, which can bring down our overall inflammation. And we can then feel good that we actually took something out of our diet and wow, we feel better, whatever that symptom might have been, whether it was skin, pain, joint relief, headaches, migraines, whatever it might have been. So that's the key, I think, with this test, and why I think we see a lot of the providers really, really like this test, and patients, because there's no judgment. We're not saying, oh, how bad is Josh because he's eating eggs? No, Josh, let's take that out and let's see how you feel. And so that's the kind of approach. It's more of a collaborative experience between the provider and the patient, and one where the patient can actually take control of their own destiny versus going, oh my God, here's a 50-page genetic report. Oh my God, I've got no idea what that is. I'm going to pay the money because hopefully that'll make me feel better. It doesn't work that way. Whereas with this test, it's easy to understand intentionally because we want the patient to actually move forward and have a positive outcome. The other nice thing for the providers is then on top of that, the provider then has earned the trust of the patient because they're starting to feel better. This investment made some sense. What else, Josh, do you think I should be doing next? Because I'm feeling better already in a short period of time. And I think that's the other nice thing about this is there's not an instant, because again, but it's certainly within weeks or days, we're seeing patients have a demonstrable improvement if they're prepared to take out, in general, it's never more than 5 to 10 foods. So I think it gives you a really easy way of accessing better health, but with something you understand, because we all know what an egg is. We all know what milk is. But again, not everyone knows what triglycerides are or zonulin or lipopolysaccharides. And why should they? The idea here is to democratize this, to make it simple and make sure that if you invest in this test and follow through on it, you'll see a positive outcome.
And I love that. That's like, it's simple, easy, lucrative, because you're not spending what you don't need. I always tell people, I'm going to spend your money like I'd spend mine.
Yeah.
And now we're getting evolved. So simple, easy, lucrative, and fun is my definition of self-care. And this is one of those things, because crap, like we do these two things, we're doing really good. And that's going to take wellness in that 80-20 rule. Like, yes, of course. Why do this complex when you can do simple first?
Yep.
Right? We can always move down that line, but if you do feel better, these inflammation markers are going down, your lipids are looking way better, we're changing around those numbers that have high impact. And all of a sudden we put the right stuff in and you're feeling great. Done. I'm good. I'm happy with you.
Yeah.
And that makes, you didn't touch on this, but you also make the clinicians' lives easier, right? You have a portal, you have a free hotline, you can make appointments to talk to providers. So pharmacists who can finger stick, because they do this for all CLIA waiver, right? We got it. So pharmacists all over the country, in this country, 20,000 of them can be doing these tests tomorrow and getting really good results without having to know anything.
Yeah. And I think the other important thing is every pharmacy's got some amazing products, but these tests help identify which of those amazing products work for each of the patients or kind of, customers coming through the door. And I think that's the other nice thing about this. It's like, there is no doubt that every pharmacy has got the most amazing products. These tests help you work out which of the products which are amazing for you, the consumer walking through the door.
Which is why when we're in the midst of launching our RX to Wellness platform and men's vitality and women's radiance and even foundations, we want to include these in the everybody needs it.
Yeah.
Right. And so that way it's like, oh my gosh, we have a big impact on a very, very crucial things in our time where we can actually reverse some of these things and move people towards getting off medicines, getting off things they don't need. That's the essence of this program, right? Is deprescribing 10 million unnecessary medications. Well, how do you unnecessary a medication? You peel the body. And we just covered two major, huge things. We didn't have time for oat. I wanted to talk about it. We will talk about it at some point.
Right for oat, for sure.
Wait, organic acid tests, and you're working on some other big projects. What's next for KBMO?
So we've just rolled out the organic acids. We're looking at mycotoxins coming down the line as well. And we're looking at some other brain to gut markers as well that will be included in that gut barrier panel.
Ooh, can't wait.
Not only leaky gut, it's leaky brain. And so again,
leaky brain is like, we didn't talk, like, how do we do something simple to cause cognitive dysfunction? Because the number one thing people are worried about in their health is losing their marbles.
Yeah.
And so if we can do something simple, I can't wait to be a part of that, because then you just knocked off another aha. So we got double ahas today, my friend. How do people find out more about these tests? And obviously, if you're in our programming, we're going to be able to do this for you. So stay tuned, stay ready, people. But
I mean, I would say go see Josh and the program, because it's all going to be available through there. So I would say that would be the first up spot,
because you are practitioner only.
Yeah. So because we're direct to provider, Josh obviously direct to patient. So again, the idea is that we want to make sure we funnel it through. They're great tests, but they're great tests in the hands of a great provider, and I think that's where this really kind of helps bring everything together. And that's one of the things that we focused on, is to make sure that we can not only give the providers a good test, but also some protocols around those tests which they can pass on to the patient. So it's really joining the kind of dots, as it were, to make sure that everything works together. And so we're a small part of that in terms of the testing, and it's really the power of those providers that we work with, which enables the kind of magic to happen. And so that's why we always think it's really good to kind of work with great providers like Josh and his crew on that end as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm really looking forward to working with you to getting these labs and educating those pharmacists, because I've been doing that for a long time. And look, that is the accessibility point. You don't have to go to another advanced doctor. Everybody's going into the pharmacy 12 times a year.
Yeah.
And these are the things we can do. So I'm looking forward to growing this on a big level with you. Thank you so much. This has been fun. We're coming back on oat and mycotoxins. I gotta get your stamp on that. But man, this has been fun. I'm glad that we crossed paths when we did, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
All right, guys, this was an amazing episode. That's a wrap. Until next time, stay well. Thanks for joining me today on Beyond the Pills. If our mission to deprescribe 10 million unnecessary medications resonates with you, share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review. Whether you're a practitioner or someone ready to reclaim your health, Visit rx2wellness.com for free resources to begin your journey. Together, let's go beyond the pills and co-create a world of vibrant health and true healing. Until next time, live better and stay well.